Good morning. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioners' Weekly Meeting for Wednesday, November 6th, 2024. I'm a little tired. I got up at 3 a.m. to check my phone and couldn't go back to sleep. With that, Commissioner Plant, you ready to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I am ready to approve the consent agenda. Good morning.
Commissioner Goen.
I would also vote to approve the consent agenda.
As would I. Let's go to proceeding number 06A-153R. Dr. Fishhaber from 2006.
2006, yes. Hopefully we're near the end. So Park Creek Metro District and Denver are requesting to make a second amendment to their application for installing a Q-cutter signaler at the crossing of 40th Avenue in Havana, near Havana in Denver. The request is for additional changes to the application as they had originally amended it and approved by decision number C230416, mailed July 11th of 2023, consisting of some changes to the plans, including signage placement, the addition of truncated domes on the sidewalks, relocation of the vehicle detection zone, and adjusting the timing calculations to account for the rate speed limit on the roadway, and adjustment of the vehicle detection zone, and a request by the City and County of Denver to operate the Q-cutter signal in a hybrid operation so that they can provide time of day operations once the vehicle queues from 40th Avenue and Havana Street start regularly queuing near the crossing. As grounds for this motion and the amendment, the applicants submitted the previous amended application and received no comments from Union Pacific, the date by which UP had agreed to provide the comments. But then 2 weeks later, UP consultants cited technical concerns related to future operations of the Q-cutter signal by Denver and possible interconnection software upgrades that may be installed because of the existing traffic signal to enhance the Q-cutter signal. Since that time, Park Creek and Denver have worked with UP to resolve the remaining technical issues and concerns, and this amended application addresses those concerns so that UP will amend the existing construction and maintenance agreement, which they were holding out on until these changes. There were no responses to the motion or the amended application. So I am ready for a recommendation unless you have any questions.
I think we'd welcome a recommendation.
Staff would recommend that the Commission grant the second amended application, require Park Creek to file the C&M agreement by July 31st of 2025, and inform the Commission of the project being completed by December 31st of 2025, and for UP to update the national inventory form by December 31st of 2025 as well.
18 years and counting, Commissioner Plant.
Who says we move slowly? I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman.
I also agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision granting the motion. Thank you, Dr. Fishhaber.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Proceeding number 24A-0388R, Town of Mintern, Mr. Farrell. Oh, you're muted.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners, on this chilly morning. I'm Alan Farrell with the Rail Transit Safety Section, as you mentioned, and I'm here to address any questions in relation to 24A-0388R. And in this proceeding, the Town of Mintern submitted an application to install an asphalt pedestrian path at an existing at-grade crossing of Railroad Avenue with the existing tracks owned by UPRR. The tracks are currently out of service, and there are no current plans to use the track in the near future. Improvements to the crossing are needed to improve pedestrian safety and meet Americans with Disability Act standards. The pedestrian path is proposed to be 7.5 feet wide and 4-inch thick asphalt. Passive warning signage at the crossing will remain the same. Traffic volume using the crossing is currently 300 vehicles per day, of which 6% is heavy vehicles. No school buses use the crossing. The traffic posted speed limit at the crossing is 15 miles per hour. Mintern estimates the cost of the project at $12,157.84. Mintern will cover the cost of this work through a CDOT Revitalizing Main Street program grant. Mintern proposes to start the installation of the asphalt pedestrian path and approval of the application and anticipates being complete with the work by May 1st, 2025. And there were no interventions in this matter. And unless you have questions, I have a recommendation.
We'd welcome your recommendation.
Thank you. Staff recommends the Commission deem the application complete, grant the application, and require Mintern to inform the Commission when the upgrade of the crossing is complete, and require UPRR to file an update USDOT crossing inventory form for the crossing in this proceeding by May 1st, 2025.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision deeming the application complete, granting it, and submitting the required filings. So thank you, Mr. Farrell. Proceeding number 24A-0396R. Mr. Farrell, it always seems like there's three railroad things at once. El Paso County.
I think that's statutory, sir.
I missed that, but Mr. Farrell.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. In this proceeding, El Paso County submitted an application to modify interconnection and preemption of active warning signals related to installation of a new traffic signal at the intersection of Whiteville Boulevard, Security Boulevard, and Fontaine Boulevard, with the crossing of Fontaine Boulevard with the tracks owned by BNSF in Colorado Springs. The new signal will replace an existing outdated traffic control signal and is proposed to be interconnected and preempted by the existing Fontaine Boulevard at-grade active warning crossing. El Paso County proposes providing a total of 37.7 seconds of maximum preemption time and advanced preemption time of 19 seconds. Traffic volume using the crossing is currently 13,761 vehicles per day, of which 5% are heavy vehicles. No school buses use the crossing. The traffic on posted speed limit at the crossing is 30 miles per hour. There are currently 12 daytime through trains and 12 nighttime through trains each day that use the crossing at a maximum timetable speed of 55 miles per hour. There have been 3 property-only accidents and 1 fatality reported at the crossing since 1975. El Paso County estimates the cost of this project at $187,977. El Paso County will cover the cost of this work utilizing funds from Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority funds. El Paso County proposes to start the project on approval of the application and anticipates being complete with the work by December 31st, 2024. And there were no interventions filed in this matter. And again, unless you have questions, I have staff's recommendation.
Nope, please give your recommendation.
Thank you. Staff recommends the Commission deem the application complete, grant the application, and require El Paso County to inform the Commission when the work is complete, and require El Paso County and BNSF to file an update USDOT crossing inventory form for the crossing in this proceeding by December 31st, 2024.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I. And again, that can be an ABC decision, deeming the application complete, granting it, and requiring the associated filing. So thank you, Mr. Farrell.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Proceeding number 22A-0230E, Black Hills Phase 2 proceeding. Mr. Eating, Mr. Acera.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Michael Eden with your advisory staff. This morning, I'll tee up your deliberations on the application for rehearing, re-argument, or reconsideration, which I'll refer to as the RRR, that Black Hills Colorado Electric filed on September 24th, 2024. As background, the Commission issued the Phase 2 decision proceeding on September 4th, 2024. In the Phase 2 decision, the Commission approved a modified clean energy plan, or CEP, that includes a resource portfolio comprised of a 50 megawatt storage project and 2 separate solar projects, bid 11408 and bid 33403. One of the more substantial modifications the Commission made to the company's preferred resource portfolio was a change from bid 11405A, a 200 megawatt build transfer agreement, or BTA solar project, to bid 11408. which is essentially the same 200 megawatt solar project, but is the power purchase agreement or PPA version. And as you know, a BTA project is a project that is built by a third-party developer, but ultimately sold to the company to own and operate. In contrast, the PPA project is built, owned, and operated by a third-party developer. In the Phase 2 decision, the Commission explained its concerns that, absent a performance incentive mechanism or PIM, customers largely bear the risk that BTA projects will go over budget on construction costs or will produce less energy than anticipated. Turning to Black Hills RRR, the company urges the Commission to move forward with bid 11405A, the solar BTA, instead of bid 11408, the solar PPA. Black Hills asserts that the BTA solar project is less expensive than the PPA version, and that the company has essentially the same ability to control costs with BTAs or PPAs. In addition, Black Hills states that it is willing to file a PIM for the solar BTA project to address the risk of cost overruns. Another core piece of the company's RRR is that Black Hills provides updated pricing information for the approved and backup solar projects. Based on this updated price information, Black Hills seeks clarification as to the flexibility the company has to enter into PPA and BTA contracts with revised pricing. As you know, much of the details regarding this updated pricing is highly confidential. On October 4th, the Commission issued an interim decision that acknowledges the new information. And among other things, this decision directed Black Hills to file certain supplemental information and set a deadline by which interveners could respond to the RRR and the supplemental information. Per this decision, the company submitted a supplemental filing that includes the required additional information, as well as proposed PIMs for bid 11405A, which is the solar BTA. The Commission also received timely responses from trial staff of the Commission, the Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA, and the Colorado Energy Office, or CEO. So with that context in place, I'll turn now to one of the core issues of the RRR. Black Hills requests that the Commission switch from bid 11408, the PPA project, to bid 11405A, the BTA. In its supplemental filing, Black Hills proposes a cost to construct PIM and an operations PIM for the BTA project. At a high level, the company's proposed cost to construct PIM would use a 5% deadband, with the company bearing 25% of any overage or savings outside of the deadband. Black Hills' proposed operations PIM is comprised of two components. The first component would be focused on the production tax credit, or PTC, transfer price, and the second component would address the annual energy production from the facility. Notably, for the second component, the baseline generation would be the park potential of the facility, which would largely remove factors such as cloud cover, weather, and other environmental conditions from the PIM calculation. In its response, staff argues that the Commission should retain bid 11408, the PPA solar, and not switch to the BTA project as Black Hills requests. Among other things, staff states that it has serious ongoing concerns regarding the increased risk to ratepayers posed by utility ownership of generation resources. Staff further argues that there are significant issues regarding the company's proposed PIMs. Staff explained some of these issues in its response, but overall argues that the Commission should defer finalizing the PIMs until the follow-on CPCN proceeding. In UCA's response, UCA similarly argues that the Commission should stick with the PPA bid. UCA argues that if the PTC assumptions underlying the BTA bid are off by even a small percentage, the PPA option may be the lower cost option in the long run. CEO also filed a response but does not endorse any particular resource portfolio. Instead, CEO primarily urges the Commission to reach the fastest resolution possible in this proceeding to preserve bid pricing. So the first decision point before you is whether to retain bid 11408, the PPA solar, or switch to bid 11405A, the BTA solar, recognizing that this issue implicates the PIMs that Black Hills proposed and which staff critiques. I have a recommendation, but we'll pause for any questions or your discussion.
Yeah, if you could give us your recommendation, then we'll come back with questions, comments, discussion, or a vote.
Sure. Advisors recommend against switching to BTA bid 11405A as Black Hills request. As staff and UCA note in their responses, there are ongoing concerns that cost overruns associated with the BTA bid would be borne by ratepayers, and the PIMs Black Hills proposed for bid 11405A do not sufficiently ensure that the BTA bid will be the best option for ratepayers. For example, under the flexibility built into the proposed cost to construct PIM with the 5% deadband, the BTA bid could end up being more expensive for ratepayers than the PPA alternative with no financial disincentive for the company. In short, the risk of cost overruns still justifies pursuing PPA bid 11408 instead of the BTA bid 11405A.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I support the recommendation. And I'll admit I went back and forth on this, but I think the risks around increased costs with the company ownership are just far too high at this point. And so I would support the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman.
Yeah, I agree with your recommendation, Mr. Eden. I think a switch to the BTA would add a significant number of risks that would ultimately be borne by ratepayers, the cost to construct, how the PTC works out, which the company has requested a band around if they were to develop the resource or own the resource, and also the calculation of output could easily not match the resource as bid. So I think there's a significant number of risks here. And even within the deadband, as you stated, the company could essentially have this go over budget and not pay any penalty and have it be less cost advantageous than doing the PPA. So at the end of the day, I think the PPA significantly reduces all of those risks for ratepayers, and agree with your recommendation to maintain bid 11408.
Yeah, I agree with UCA staff, you, Mr. Eden, and both my colleagues that it's just more risky to do the BTA. I thought the operational PIM and some of the other modifications were revealing about how the utility wants to shift those risks to customers that IPPs routinely bear. So keep going.
Okay. So as I referenced earlier, the approved portfolio also contains a second solar project, bid 33403. And it's RRR Black Hills request that if the commission decides to retain the PPA bid 11408, the commission should allow the company to switch from bid 33403, a PPA solar project, to bid 22303B, which is a 100 megawatt BTA solar project. Black Hills argues this modification is justified based on the updated pricing information and the fact that the resulting portfolio would have a more balanced level of company ownership. Staff supports the company's alternative request to switch from bid 33403 to bid 22303B. Staff specifically suggests providing Black Hills with the flexibility to select either bid 22303B or bid 22301B. Staff notes that these two bids are very similar. Both are 100 megawatts, BTA projects with almost identical pricing. UCA also seems to support the move from bid 33403 to bid 22303B, arguing that after selecting PPA bid 11408, the remaining resources should be based on the lowest cost. I'll stop here for your deliberations on the remaining solar project. I can also provide a recommendation if you would like.
Yeah, if you could provide your recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. Advisors recommend allowing Black Hills to move forward with the next lowest cost solar bid, consistent with the recommendations from staff and UCA. Specifically, the company should have the flexibility to select either bid 22303B or bid 22301B, but whichever PTA bid the company selects must be subject to a cost to construct and operations PIM. The commission should make clear that its authorization to move forward with bid 22303B and bid 22301B should be contingent on the relevant BTA contracts staying at or below the revised pricing put forth in Table 3 of the company's RRR.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
Also agree.
as do I, contingent on us the resolution of the PIM conversation, which I think is coming. I would be concerned about this shift without an appropriate PIM. So with that placeholder, why don't you jump to the next conversation?
Certainly. So given the Commission's decisions today, the approved portfolio consists of bid 11408, which is the 200 megawatt solar PPA, bid 24501, which is a 50 megawatt storage BTA, and either bid 22303B or bid 22301B, both of which are a 100 megawatt solar BTA project. For this next topic of discussion, I'll present the PIMs that would apply to the BTA projects, starting with the cost to construct PIM. In the phase 2 decision, the commission established a cost to construct PIM on the 50 megawatt storage BTA, in which the baseline is the construction cost. There is a 5% dead band around the baseline, and Black Hills bears 25% of any overage or savings outside of the dead band. No party opposes this PIM, but advisors recommend the commission make one clarification to the baseline. In the phase 2 decision, the commission specified that the baseline for the cost to construct PIM is the construction cost set forth in Appendix A to the 120-day report, i.e. the build transfer price. Now, the exact construction cost is marked as highly confidential, but I'll note that the baseline in Appendix A for the 50 megawatt storage project appears to be different from the baseline Black Hills puts forth in its supplemental RRR filing. In its supplemental RRR filing, Black Hills puts forth a higher baseline figure. I'm happy to answer any questions the best I can, given the confidentiality considerations, but to cut to the chase, advisors simply recommend that the commission reiterate that the baseline for the cost to construct PIM is the construction cost set forth in Appendix A to the 120-day report, as calculated from the listed build transfer price. We further recommend that the cost to construct PIM and the baseline set forth in Appendix A apply to any and all BTA projects that are ultimately developed, including bid 22303B and bid 22301B.
I think you're muted there, Mr. Chairman, but I can read your lips.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I would agree with the recommendation, but I don't know if Chairman, if you had another proposal that you wanted us to consider. No. Okay.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree with your recommendation.
as do I.
Thanks. So in its response, one of the specific issues staff raises with the cost to construct PIM is whether the 5% dead band is included in the incentive-disincentive calculation. In other words, staff argues that it's unclear whether the company is required to bear 25% of the cost overruns from the baseline or just 25% of the cost overruns above the 5% dead band. Staff also raises issues of whether and how transmission, interconnection, and network upgrades will be included in the cost to construct PIM. Staff likewise argues that it and other interveners have had limited time to consider the company's force majeure proposal. Staff ultimately argues that these and other issues should be addressed in the follow-on CPCN proceedings. I'll open it up for your deliberation on how to proceed with the current concerns staff raises with this cost to construct PIM. I can answer any questions or offer my recommendation.
I'd welcome your recommendation.
In response to staff's question as to whether the 5% dead band is included in the incentive and disincentive calculation, advisors recommend clarifying that it is. In other words, there is no deduction due to the 5% dead band. The commission should also clarify that the sharing percentage should be applied to the overage and the underage and not the total project amount. So if the project with a $100 million baseline is actually constructed for $112 million, Black Hills would bear 25% of the entire $12 million. As for staff's questions about transmission, interconnection, and network upgrades, it doesn't appear that these transmission-related costs are included in the construction cost baseline, and thus should not be included in the cost to construct PIM calculation. However, advisors recommend deferring final resolution of this issue to the follow-on CPCN proceeding. Advisors similarly recommend deferring to the follow-on CPCN proceedings the details of how force majeure events and changes in federal law impact the cost to construct PIM. To provide Black Hills sufficient certainty, however, the Commission should approve the general concept that events meeting the definition of force majeure in the model PPA will generally warrant adjustments to the cost to construct PIM. Likewise, the Commission should approve the concept that changes in federal law, such as an imposition of additional tariffs that directly increase the cost of project components for a selected project, will also generally warrant adjustments to the cost to construct PIM.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
Also agree.
as do I.
All right, the next matter is the operations PIM. I won't get into the details of Black Hills proposal, but as I referenced earlier, there are two separate components focused on the PTCs and then energy production. Both of these components would use a 5% debt band. Regarding the energy production component, the company designed the PIM to exclude any factors that are outside the company's control, such as cloud cover, weather, and other environmental conditions. In addition, Black Hills argues that the operations PIM should only apply to the first 10 years of a project's life. Staff argues that the operations PIM is insufficient to protect ratepayers and lacks important details, including how the PIM will treat curtailments. Staff also argues the proposed operations PIM does not account for lost PTCs due to poor generation performance and opposes the 10-year life of the operations PIM. Finally, staff is concerned that the company attempted to slip an unrefined deferred tax asset or DTA proposal into the operations PIM and recommends Black Hills be required to obtain explicit commission authorization before applying any carrying charge to a DTA associated with the PTCs. In general, staff continues to argue that the commission should defer consideration of these issues to a follow-on CPCN. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the operations PIM, but I also have a recommendation if you would like.
We'd welcome your recommendation.
Advisors fundamentally disagree with the company's attempts to remove factors such as environmental conditions from the PIM calculation. Such environmental conditions factor into the capacity factors of each solar bid that was evaluated in phase 2. Even a slight variation in the capacity factor that a bid uses can have significant impacts to a project's economics, and these economics largely determine which bids are selected in the phase 2 modeling. Ratepayers should not bear the risk that BTA bids rely on unrealistically optimistic assumptions. Thus, advisors recommend rejecting Black Hills' proposed operations PIM and instead establishing an operations PIM that derives its baseline from the levelized cost of energy, or LEC, used in the phase 2 modeling as modified by the updated pricing information put forth in RRR. Using the LEC assumptions will inherently incorporate factors such as O&M cost, capacity factor, and the PTC transfer rate, and is more consistent with the Commission's initial directives in the phase 1 decision. The LEC baseline will need to be adjusted to remove the capital-based cost and account for curtailments, but advisors recommend deferring resolution of these details to the follow-on CPCN proceeding. In addition to the LEC baseline, advisors recommend establishing a 2% dead band. This 2% dead band, which is narrower than the CTC dead band and what the Black Hills initially proposed, is justified based on how close other available solar projects are on price. Again, a lot of these details are confidential, but at bottom, a 2% dead band helps ensure that if the selected solar project turns out to be more expensive than an alternative project, Black Hills receives a financial disincentive. For any variances more than 2% above or below the baseline, Advisors recommend 50% of any cost or savings be allocated to Black Hills. Advisors also recommend expressly rejecting Black Hills' proposal to limit the life of the operations PIM to 10 years. The economics of the phase 2 bid examine the entire life of the project, not just the first 10 years. As with the COFA Construct PIM, certain details will need to be refined in follow-on CPCN proceedings. However, the Commission should establish the basic parameters now so that Black Hills can decide whether to move forward with its BTA projects or switch to PPA alternatives. The outline of this operations PIM would apply to any company-owned solar project. Given that bid 24501 is a capacity resource, however, and this is the 50 megawatt storage, advisors recommend that the Commission defer to the appropriate follow-on CPCN the decision of whether any operations PIM should or even could apply to the storage project. And finally, consistent with staff's proposal, advisors also recommend that the Commission require the company to obtain explicit authorization before applying any carrying charge to a DTA associated with the PTCs.
Thank you for the comprehensive recommendation. Greatly appreciated. Commissioner Plant.
I agree.
Commissioner Gilman.
I agree.
As do I.
Okay. Turning to the emissions PIM, in the phase 2 decision, the Commission directed Black Hills to submit an emissions reduction PIM 14 days after any decision ruling on an application for RRR. Instead of waiting 14 days after the RRR decision, Black Hills proposes an emissions PIM in its supplemental RRR filing. The proposed emissions PIM focuses exclusively on incentivizing an earlier in-service date, which Black Hills reasons will reduce emissions. The company indicates that the baseline for the emissions PIM will be the in-service dates for the projects as determined in their respective BTA contracts. The company proposes a 3-month deadband around this baseline with a flat penalty amount for each month outside of that deadband. Staff argues that the emissions PIM also contains defects that require additional time to address. Staff argues it is actually just a timing PIM and that Black Hills has not connected it to actual emissions reduction. Staff asserts that a future CPCN proceeding represents the best way for the Commission to develop an effective package of PIMs. And I have a recommendation on this point as well, if you would like.
You're on a roll, Mr. Eden.
Advisors recommend rejecting Black Hills' proposed emissions or timing PIM. It appears that the baseline for the proposed PIM would be the in-service dates for the projects as determined in their respective BTA contracts. Advisors fear that using such a baseline could be susceptible to gaming. Rather than attempting to revise the emissions PIM in this RRR process, advisors agree with staff that consideration of this PIM should be deferred to the follow-on CPCN proceedings. Accordingly, advisors suggest the Commission vacate the directive in the phase 2 decision for a stakeholder process to develop an emissions PIM and simply direct Black Hills to file a revised emissions PIM in the follow-on CPCN proceedings.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman, I know how much you love stakeholder processes on this issue.
If they work, I love them. And you know how much I love the idea of an emissions PIM, which has yet to come to fruition. But this doesn't look like one. I mean, around a date that is not yet set, and assuming that all that matters for emissions is the timing of the resource, misses the mark by a very wide margin. So I agree with your recommendation, Mr. Eden.
As do I. Bring us home, Mr. Eden. Last issue, I think.
Yeah, home stretch here. So in its RRR, Black Hills specifically requests the Commission allow for 3 pricing flexibilities. First, the company requests that it be allowed to select backup bidders if a primary bid fails, which would include a price increase above the revised pricing Black Hills provides in its RRR filing. The company clarifies that it would not pursue bids that have had a price increase of 5% or more. Second, the company asks that a bidder be allowed to consolidate 2 separate project bids into one aggregate project bid. Third, Black Hills asks that the commission allow a single project to have divided ownership in the IPP and the company. Regarding these flexibilities, Black Hills suggests that changes to the resources that the commission approved in its phase 2 decision be subject to the 30-day notice and protest process that staff proposed and the commission adopted. Staff agrees that the company should be allowed to negotiate and enter into contracts for these selected bids up to, but not above, their revised pricing for these bids as set forth in the RRR filings, excluding bids that saw a price increase of 5% or more. In contrast, staff recommends against the company's proposal to allow bidders to consolidate separate projects into one bid, and likewise recommends rejecting the company's proposal to allow the ownership structure of a bid to be changed. And I also have a recommendation on this point if you would like.
Please go ahead.
Advisors recommend clarifying that moving forward with the projects at or below the revised pricing put forth in the RRR filings will entitle the company to the typical presumption of prudence under Commission Rule 3617, subsection D, so long as doing so is otherwise consistent with the Commission's decisions, and provided that projects that have experienced a price increase of 5% or more are deemed to have failed, and acquisitions of such projects will not be entitled to a presumption of prudence. In addition, the Commission should establish that any changes to the resources that the Commission approved in its decisions, including this forthcoming RRR decision, will be subject to the 30-day notice and protest process that staff proposed and the Commission adopted. In this 30-day notice process, the Commission could proactively require additional analysis or process if it has concerns that the resulting cost will ultimately not be reasonable. In contrast, advisors recommend denying the company's request to be allowed to consolidate two separate projects or allow a single project to have divided ownership for the reasons set forth by staff in its response.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman,
I also agree.
as do I, and I often think given the utility flexibility is a good idea, but given where we are in this process so late, I think we better stick to what you're recommending. So I think that concludes the RRR issues, Mr. Eden. Thanks so much for working this through with us. And anything else on this? I think I'd be okay with an ABC order.
As long as your colleagues agree on the APC, then that's nothing else for me.
I will check. Commissioner Plant,
Yes, I agree.
Commissioner Goman.
Yes.
Thanks again, Mr. Eden, for working this through with us. I think it landed in a better place from where we were 60 days ago. So greatly appreciate you. Proceeding number 23A-0471E, Ms. Crandall, Mr. Acera, mission data exceptions.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Kelly Crandall with the advisory team, joined by Alex Acera from Commission Counsel. The item for discussion today is exceptions filed by Mission Data Coalition on recommended decision R24-0684, which granted a motion and settlement agreement to resolve Public Service Company of Colorado's application for a software development kit and regarding provisions around data accessibility. If you could please bear with me, this was a really technical application, so I have a little bit of lead up so that people can follow it, I think, a little more easily as you're in the decision points. This application was filed as a result of proceeding 21A-0279E, where a settlement agreement was approved, which required Public Service to complete and file a data delivery study, which I'll call going forward just the study. Because that case amended a prior application regarding Public Service's Advanced Grid Intelligence and Security Initiative, I'll stick with what parties have been calling this, which is the amended AGIS settlement going forward to just distinguish the two settlement agreements we're talking about. The amended Aegis settlement used addressed practices public service was to follow with regard to distributed intelligence or the use of grid edge computing on advanced meters that collect granular data. It also stated a principle of data parity between public service and customers authorized third parties. And for the benefit of the listening audience, an example of an authorized third party is a customer consenting to share their time-stamped energy usage data with a smart thermostat vendor to get recommendations on optimizing settings for the thermostat. The study that resulted from the settlement looked at 4 practices for providing 1-second data to third parties. The one I'll speak about, one of the ones I'll speak about most is direct data upload. There's also Excel Energy or Itron Clouds, with Itron being the meter vendor. And the other one that will be frequently mentioned is local polling agent or LPA, which is essentially the current practice. Public Services application was filed on September 22nd of 2023 and describes a software development kit, which provides code information through GitLab to customers or developers who want to build applications to use 1-second meter data. Public Service sought permission to sunset this kit in 2 years if it's not being used, and to defer any related incremental costs into a regulatory asset without carrying costs. On April 26th, Public Service filed a motion and settlement agreement that was joined by trial staff of the Commission and the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA. The settlement agreement proposed to approve the application with modifications, including additional procedures around the sunset of the kit. And the settlement as a whole, although not certain software development kit or cost recovery provisions, was opposed by Mission Data, and there was a technical demonstration and hearing in June. The recommended decision was issued September 24th, and it found the settlement was just, reasonable, and in the public interest, despite opposition. And in so doing, it emphasized that its position or its purpose was to consider the settlement agreement, not the optimal approach for providing data overall. Mission Data filed exceptions on October 14th. After a Commission granted extension, Public Service responded on October 28th. And Mission Data then filed a motion for leave to reply and reply with a request for a shortened response time. So with your permission, I can turn to decision points, starting with the motion for leave to reply, and then a couple of decision points around exceptions, and then turning back to the request for shortened response time.
That'd be great.
Thank you. Mission Data filed its motion for leave to reply on November 1st in response to Public Service's response to its exceptions. Mission Data argues that Public Service made factual errors or misrepresentations, which it seeks to correct, including around issues like whether Mission Data had previously raised competitive concerns throughout the proceeding. Mission Data represents that trial and staff and UCA take no position on, and Public Service opposes the motion to reply. So I can pause for questions or make a recommendation.
Nope, we'd welcome your recommendation.
Thank you. Advisors recommend the Commission grant Mission Data's motion for leave to reply and consider its reply for purposes of ensuring a robust record. Mission Data has long been engaged in the issue of advanced metering deployment in Colorado, and the filing corrects or clarifies certain information about its prior positions and membership.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman.
I also agree.
As do I.
Thank you. I'll move to the second item, which relates to its exceptions. In its exceptions, Mission Data argues that granting the company's request to sunset the software development kit with the process determined by the settlement agreement is a collateral attack on the amended Aegis settlement from the prior proceeding. Mission Data argues that the amended Aegis settlement didn't have an end date or a sunset process when it was created, and creating one through this process is inappropriate and a violation of its due process. In its response, Public Service argues that Mission Data is misinterpreting Colorado law, which states that a collateral attack would be an attempt to avoid, evade, defeat, or deny the force and effect of a decision. Public Service argues the recommended decision correctly found that the request to sunset the software development kit was not a collateral attack because the subsequent pleading raised changed circumstances such as the cost of maintenance and data about limited customer and developer usage of the kit and the technical support. So I can answer questions or provide a recommendation.
Nope, but if you could go to your recommendation, that'd be great.
Thank you. I agree with the principles raised in Public Service's response and recommend the Commission deny Mission Data's exceptions on this point. Ultimately, the effect of the recommended decision is to approve a process by which the company can propose to stop providing technical support to software development kit users based on low uptake. So that's proposing not to continue to pay for a service that's not being used. I don't see that as inconsistent with the prior approvals of the amended Aegis settlement. And it is undisputed that there's been limited uptake so far of the kit or of the technical support options. And while Mission Data argues that this was added without due process, I think it's been clear even since the application was filed and provided to parties from the amended Aegis settlement, some of whom joined this settlement. So there's been a lot of notice and due process here, and continuing to uphold the recommended decision's approval institutes further due process if Public Service does propose to sunset the kit and technical support in the future.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman.
Also great.
Thank
as
you.
do I.
Thank you, commissioners. The next item is regarding Mission Data's exceptions about the idea that the recommended decision and the application failed to comply with the amended Aegis settlement, and the data delivery study was insufficient. So this, I'd like to give an overview and then maybe proceed in two parts, two decision points for the next piece. So Mission Data makes several arguments that the study wasn't sufficient and Public Service otherwise didn't fulfill its obligations under the amended Aegis settlement. First, it argues that the recommended decision failed to properly evaluate evidence related to false assumptions about direct data delivery and conclusory assertions by Itron on security issues, as well as evidence that that practice is being pursued in other states. Second, Mission Data argues that Public Service violated Commission rules and failed to comply with the amended Aegis settlement by not studying how to provide rate information or disaggregation insights to customer authorized third parties within the study. Third, Mission Data argues the company did not meaningfully address data parity, creating an uneven playing field by which third parties would only be able to make inferior energy management recommendations to customers. Fourth, Mission Data argues that the company did not comply with the amended Aegis settlement because it excludes customers with multiple meters from using the home area network. And finally, Mission Data argues that the recommended decision's concerns about the costs of redoing the study are more appropriate for a rate case. In response, Public Service states there's substantial evidence in the record to support the settlement agreement is just, reasonable, and in the public interest, including that Public Service states that Mission Data raises issues and exceptions which were not previously litigated, including competitive concerns, the risk of subsidizing unregulated markets, and limits on functionality as noted. Well, I'll go on. Second, Public Service reiterates how its study was in compliance with the amended Aegis settlement and provides data parity through tools like Excel Energy Launchpad. Public Service asserts Mission Data is incorrect in attributing absent words to certain Commission rules, which would be a violation of laws of statutory construction, and the recommended decision correctly applies the burden of proof and properly rejected evidence about other states as speculative. Finally, Mission Data says that Public Service says that Mission Data misunderstands direct data upload, and it misinterprets statements by Public Service witnesses around security issues, and that the judge reasonably determined witness credibility. So it can answer questions or provide a recommendation on how to address these exceptions.
Again, if you could provide a recommendation, that'd be great.
Thank you. So I will start with, if it's okay with you, first component of the recommendation being the treatment of the exceptions themselves, and then pause and then discuss next steps based on you all's decision here. So first, advisors recommend the Commission deny Mission Data's exceptions as to the company's compliance with the amended Aegis settlement. We do agree with Mission Data. There appear to be flaws in the study. The study itself acknowledges, and a Public Service witness conceptually agreed, that there could be a single shared agent developed for direct data upload functionality, but then the study fails to really grapple with this based on conclusory statements from Itron around security. And while coming to this issue after the recommended decision, I wasn't persuaded that Public Service witnesses really clearly explained or justified this decision. At the same time, I don't think it's so clear that the study was poorly scoped as to support an argument of noncompliance, that customers are being harmed by current data sharing practices, or that Mission Data's suggested solution, which is to refile the study with refined assumptions, would be the correct policy approach to resolve these potential flaws. Overall, we agree the recommended decision correctly applied the burden of proof through its review of the application and settlement. We disagree with statements that other metered vendors' use of Linux are sufficient to know whether direct data upload is feasible in this situation. Just noting that the process of rolling out advanced metering has been incredibly complex, and there are numerous vendor functionalities that have to be assessed. Additionally, the study contrasts an approach that's currently available with 3 other data delivery approaches, which were all similarly expensive to implement and raised varying challenges related to technical and practical feasibility. Neither cloud model was really critiqued in this proceeding, and I'm not convinced that it's necessary to prioritize a particular alternative at this time to what's currently happening. Furthermore, advisors disagree that excluding rate information or disaggregation insights from the study failed to comply with the terms of the amended AGIS settlement or violated commission rules regarding data parity, given that public service appears to be using the same method for receiving customer data as is available to third parties. And while rate information could be useful to third parties, we agree with the recommended decision that it's far less clear that disaggregation insights are being developed in a way that meets the definition of Electric Rule 3027D and its requirements. There also seems to be limited harm to customers at this time from upholding the settlement agreement, given it commits the company to continue addressing direct data upload in future applications. And then uncontested evidence suggests there's been really limited uptake of the various data tools and applications so far. And there aren't any known, for example, Google Play or Apple Store applications, which would allow customers to use public service meter data. So I can pause here for your discussion and vote, and just subject to that, then I can proceed to discussing a recommendation for other steps.
Commissioner Plant, comments, questions, or vote?
Yeah, I agree with the recommendation, and I do have some thoughts around the overall study and the path forward, but I think that maybe can come a little later.
Okay, Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks. I also agree, Ms. Crandall.
As do I, but I also have thoughts about the next steps.
Thank you, commissioners. I think this next part will be the meatiest. So the second part of this recommendation relates to having rejected exceptions, what to do next. Advisors aren't persuaded that the appropriate solution to the critiques raised about the study and public services other practices would really be solved by the suggested remedy from Mission Data, which is to redo the study with modified assumptions and refile it in 18 to 24 months. We think instead there may be some additional action that is led by the commission that would be necessary to determine whether customers have sufficient ability to access, understand, and share data with authorized third parties for purposes of energy management. And so in that view, this study is more of a starting point and not an endpoint for the commission's evaluation. I am very concerned by the review of the company's technical demonstration at hearing. The testimony suggests the current customer experience with data sharing is very cumbersome. Multiple steps a customer has to go through to sign up for Xcel Energy Launchpad. Testimony indicating that if you're using a smartphone to observe data through an application, even if it's an Excel application, by leaving the house and the home Wi-Fi, you're losing access to that information. And there's also probably additional information that's needed to understand the significance of Mission Data raised a limitation on not being able to use home area networks with multiple meters. I read that as multiple accounts in the hearing transcript, but either way, it would be good to get to the bottom of that. You all have raised in multiple proceedings and venues that customers need to be able to access information that can help them make decisions about energy use. And I think from what we've seen here, it's unclear whether available tools are meeting those needs. So while we are expecting some information about distributed intelligence capabilities in the company's upcoming distribution system plan, I am concerned about the legacy of prior decisions resulting in siloing data access into different proceedings based on just technology or data granularity. And so to address the potential gap in information, and so you all can consider more holistically the appropriateness of existing rules and practices, I recommend you direct public service to file a report in a miscellaneous repository proceeding the commission would create by February 28th, 2025, that addresses a description of the solutions by which public service makes customer energy usage data and insights from 1 second or greater data available to customers, covering at least certain functions like web portal, mobile applications, electronic data interchange, green button download, a description of the solutions by which public service makes this available to customer authorized third parties. So at least Green Button Connect, Excel Energy Launchpad, et cetera. For each solution, the company should address what data is provided, its frequency and granularity, whether it's raw or derived or estimated, the steps a customer has to go through to access it and how they're made aware of them, current uptake, and design limitations that would exclude certain customers from using each solution. And I recommend the information be provided separately by customer category or, if appropriate, rate class. So it's broken down into residential, business, institutional, master meter operators, and so forth. And at the time the report's filed, the commission can consider that and then information from other cases to determine the need for next steps. So I apologize. I know that was a lot. I will leave it to you all to discuss.
If it's okay with you, Commissioner Plant, maybe I'll share some of my thoughts first and then let you take it wherever you want to go. Generally, I'm fine with the recommendation, but for me, it probably doesn't go far enough. I thought this proceeding was very focused on technologies and technology solutions in ways that I frankly struggle to understand. Accordingly, I'd like to maybe step back a little and look at the bigger picture. More broadly, as I understand it, the company is proposing to spend something like $27 billion over the next 15 years on new distribution. To put that in perspective, the entire current public service company rate base is roughly $14 billion. To help explore ways to ensure distribution investment is set at appropriate levels, I think we need to further empower third-party entities and customers to help manage customer demands. In support of this, customers will need timely access to appropriate data that can quickly be provided to third-party entities in a usable form. I'm concerned, for example, as Ms. Crandall suggested, that the company may not be setting up a situation where a customer could install a smart thermostat and use it in real time for cost and comfort. I appreciate the recommendation for future steps, but I would like to see us make a stronger statement about near-term actions in this order. We recently granted the company an extension to its DSP filing so that it's now due in December instead of next week. I would like to see that filing address how customers are receiving timely, usable, and accessible data of all kinds, not just segmented to whether this data is technically distributed intelligence or delivered by home area network or other ways. Customers have spent over $600 million on advanced metering infrastructure, and the data needs to be available for the benefit of customers, not just the company and its preferred vendors. I want to understand whether the company is setting up a customer experience that helps people get data and users share it with their own preferred vendors. We are likely at the cusp of significantly more distribution capital investment, and we have been talking since the 2016 CPCN filing about how customers will need to be partners in energy management in the future. So I want to be sure that this issue is included in the company's distribution plan filing and as part of the discussion about new distribution capital investment, which I see as the most immediate forum. Given the breadth of the spending we're anticipating for the next DSP and how quickly it's coming up, then the February 2025 report proposed by advisors can be sort of a belt and suspenders approach that we can also rely on to see if there are bigger policy changes needed. So I guess the request is to put some of these concerns in the order, bring it up a level to flag that the core principle is that customers have usable, accessible data consistent with what the company and its vendors have, and to make sure that this is part of the record and our decision making in the DSP, where there's going to be, frankly, enormous distribution investments in front of us. So a friendly amendment to Ms. Crandall's recommendation. Commissioner Plant, anywhere you'd like to go, including modification.
Yeah, I think we'll be probably layering here. First of all, I agree with the recommendation, and I support your additions there, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't agree more. I would like to have the report additionally examine whether or not a shared agent could be developed that would serve as a pathway for third parties and the utility. It seems to me in reading the report that, the Excel cloud or the Itron cloud serve as a shared agent. I'm particularly attracted to the Excel cloud option, just because it seemed to be much more streamlined in terms of managing, customer movement and, discontinuation and also enrollment. So I would like to have that discussed a little bit in more detail in the additional report. As to the DSP, I was thinking along the same lines, Mr. Chairman, and I would add to what you suggested also both the ease of use for a customer and also the ease of third-party participation in providing customer assistance. I think that the LPA solution that was sort of the conclusion here, it was also identified as the most complicated for customers. And that we know that if it's more complicated for customers, it's going to get less uptake. We just already know that. And the LPA solution is clearly more complicated, requires many more steps. And it requires a number of times going back and forth between, the customer, the company, the third-party provider, all those things. It just creates a whole layer of complexity that really we need to get rid of. So the other two, the Itron cloud and the Excel cloud, that were determined feasible within the report, were also identified the customer experience as being much more streamlined and easier. And I think that needs to be a primary consideration as we do this. And so I would like to have some discussion in the DSP specifically around how, in addition to the points that the chairman made, which I agree with completely, how the company is evaluating the communication between the meter, the customer, third parties, and their overall distribution system planning, and how we facilitate a much more dynamic and easier engagement from consumers into that system. And the one last thing that I would point out is that one of the big challenges that we're going to be taking up as we get into the TOU discussion, time of use discussion, is consumer education, facilitation of consumer engagement in time of use. And absolutely, it's going to need to have easy enrollment and easy management for the consumers to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that TOU offers to them, and also that it offers to the system. So this is really, to the point the chairman was making, this is critical to so many different components of what we're working on right now. And I'm somewhat underwhelmed with the conclusions of this process, ending us up at LPA, which is kind of where we started.
Commissioner Goldman, anywhere you'd like to go?
I'll make some additions and then Ms. Crandall's got to try and pull it all together, I think. First of all, I agree with you both wholeheartedly. I think this issue, while this particular docket was incredibly technologically heavy and in all honesty difficult to follow, it is totally in the weeds. The general principle here about ensuring that both the customers as well as authorized third parties have access to their meter data is critical, as both of you have pointed out, to a lot of the ambitions we have around demand response, around virtual power plants, which are going to be crucial strategies to minimize costs for customers as we look at really unprecedented expectations for spending on behalf of the company. We simply have to ensure that those investments will be made in a way that optimizes and provides the maximum value to customers. And that can't happen with shutting this data up or making it so difficult to access and use that we never really get these programs off the ground. I think that's layered on top of really my kind of concern that the company does not appear to be moving. I mean, we're years and years into this gripe on demand response or virtual power plants in a really meaningful way. And to me, that signals that third parties will probably need to provide a key role here as we move forward to ensure that we actually get development of logical solutions. I'm not certain that the company is interested in pursuing these sort of programs that essentially, try to minimize their upcoming investment. And so it will be really critical that we have a functional third party kind of free market approach to ensure that we can get the sort of reaction and grid savings that we're seeking. Looking at your kind of set of questions, Ms. Crandall, that you had lined out for potential inclusion in a repository docket, I also, like my colleagues, see the immediate and most useful follow-up on this issue to occur in the distribution system plan that will be filed shortly here. So I see much less utility in having that kind of the responses that to the questions you brought up filed in a separate docket. I would recommend we have them filed with the application for the DSP. I think it actually gets to a lot of the questions that you each have brought up in terms of, and perhaps we can tailor them a little, let's talk a little more about customer experience and things like that. But a lot of it is already in Ms. Crandall's questions. So I would just change the venue and timing for that to say that comes with the DSP application. That way, at the onset of the DSP, we have this issue teed up. We can better understand where we are. We could pursue or not different supplemental avenues to look, do we have enough information to really jumpstart this discussion? And I certainly hope this discussion in the DSP will be focused kind of at a more strategic and higher level than what we saw in this proceeding, where we can focus on several key principles, like principles around data parity, principles around what the customer experience should look and feel like and how easy it should be to access this, and strategy around what the third party access should look and feel like and how easy that should be to ensure that we can actually develop the markets that I think we all recognize we need to minimize costs for ratepayers going forward. So I'd be happy to recognize in this decision those ambitions for the DSP. And to be sure, it's going to be difficult. I think there's going to be a massive number proposed that's going to distract a lot of people. It's going to get a lot of attention. I mean, it's not a distraction. It will be a large amount of work to look at the number they anticipate spending on the distribution system. But the key to minimizing that, to optimizing that, and saving for ratepayers is in a lot of these solutions. So we can't let this issue get lost there. So I think it might be helpful to communicate some of those principles for things we would hope to achieve kind of strategy wise and big picture wise in the DSP to help direct this work going forward. So sorry, Ms. Crandall, you got a lot of recommendations there, but
No, let me take it over. So I think the idea on the table is to not do a February M docket, not do the belts and suspenders, but take Ms. Crandall's list of questions as modified by the three of us and include it in an order and ask the company as best it can to include it in the DSP filing. And we'll need supplemented as we need to and supplemental direct testimony. So I think that's where this is at. Does that work for you, Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, it does. You know, if it's going to be a part of the DSP, I'd also just ask how this aligns with the aggregator model and whether or not it provides a facilitated way to integrate with the aggregator model while still providing you know, direct consumer applications. We don't want to create these parallel processes for data management if we can avoid it in any way.
I don't know whether we can do much on this record with that issue. But, you know, the other issue you were mentioning about sort of the link between service level feeders and transformers and data and how that feeds into distribution system dispatch and planning is something I care a lot about. You know, you just worry you put two EV chargers on a service level feeder, and then there's some assumption that they're going to charge at the same time. So we spend a fortune to upgrade everything, or there's one and we assume it charges at peak. So you just worry we're not doing enough to control it. And that how that data influences the operation and the planning is something that really I'd like to see explored in the DSP. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really, you know, I mean, one of the issues I think is that the integration of data on the utility side, as they're looking at, you know, how that information integrates with their ADMS and their SCADA systems and all that sort of thing. It seems like that side's been activated for exactly what you're talking about. It's just on the consumer side, there's this giant crevasse, you know.
I'm not sure it has. I don't know that the service level data feeds into their ADMS.
No, I think
that's what think it probably doesn't.
That's what they have said they're working on for, you know,
they're working on.
And that's kind of the focus of the phase 2 VPP implementation, is that dispatch level management. But it seems like the capabilities of the meter on the utility side are much farther along in terms of integration with the utility system than it is on the consumer side. And you know, I think that we need to create this sort of seamless pathway between both.
Does that give you what you need, Ms. Crandall? Maybe more than you need.
So commissioners, I think, so Chair, it was helpful for you to summarize just a couple minutes ago. That was where I was in terms of connecting the reporting proposed, but making it happen in the DSP process, recognizing some of these other issues around planning. And then I think we had Commissioner Plant's concerns regarding, just as part of the DSP, answer a couple of the more specific questions that were put by mission data on things like whether a single shared agent could be developed by Acceleritron. That sounds good to you. I think I have what I need to work with on this, and then we would just have one.
And I know there's one more issue, but can you do this as an ABC order given the 5-week deadline till the DSP? We better get this order out soon.
Yeah, if you all are comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it.
Commissioner Plant,
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Commissioner Gilman.
I am, and just want to confirm, in addition to kind of the directive for this information, just a general discussion on, I think, the priority that the commission gives, making this be a strategic, functional part of planning out the system in an optimized way to ensure we're not using ratepayer money on things that are unnecessary or overbuilt.
Agreed. You want to wrap up our last issue, Ms. Crandall?
Great, thank you, commissioners. The last item is that you all had previously granted Mission Data's motion for leave to reply and considered its reply. With that motion, it requested a shortened response time to the motion reply of 6 days, and Explained Public Service states it doesn't oppose 7 days for a response. So I can make a recommendation on that.
That'd be great.
Pursuant to your prior discussion, the facts addressed by the reply didn't really materially change the record with respect to the commission's conclusions. So we recommend the commission deny Mission Data's request for a shortened response time, as there is no further need for rebuttal.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank
And
you very
again,
much.
that could be an ABC decision consistent with the conversation. So thank you, Ms. Crandall.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 24AL-0275E, Ms. Dundas, Black Hills rate case. Notice.
Good morning, commissioners. Just 1 second. Sorry about that. Too many windows open.
You need us to come back to you?
No, I'm good. So in this proceeding, there was a motion filed by staff, UCA, and the Pueblo Joint Movements about 2 weeks ago. In their notice movement, the joint movements raised numerous concerns about the customer notice, which was issued by Black Hills on June 14th in conjunction with filing its advice letter filing with the commission. Those errors are described in the notice motion as the following. First, the movements claim that the customer notice has an incorrect charge for small business customer monthly bill percentage and dollar change. Both documents list the monthly percent change as 10%. However, correcting an error in how the Storm Uri rider is accounted for, that results in a actual monthly charge of 14%. Carrying that through, the dollar impact is reported and the notice is $25.06 when it's actually $33.85. The second mistake the motion points out is that the customer notice reports different monthly charges in dollars and as percent for residential customers. Both seem to be wrong. The notice states that the residential monthly bill will increase by 18%, but it's actually 18.8%. This was a result of a miscalculation of the RISA. The customer notice also provides the wrong information for the current residential customer bill tier rate energy charges. This error isn't copied over into the calculation, but is reported wrong on the notice. The motion also claims there's a deficiency in the phase 2 issue description. Black Hills provides no detailed information regarding the cost reallocation or other phase 2 recommendations. And finally, they state that the notice portrays the increase as a increase in approximately 36 million, but it should actually round to 37 million because I believe it's 36.8 million. So the joint movements state that that Black Hills ratepayers are entitled to accurate and adequate notice about an increase pursuant to Colorado law. And they argue that even though the commission has already certified the tariff filing is complete, Rule 3109F3D allows for an opportunity to cure. The joint movements recommend that the commission require Black Hills to immediately issue a corrected notice fixing the errors, and also point out that Black Hills may have had prior notice of these mistakes as early as July. The notice suggests that the commission has several courses of action to remedy the harm to the community's ability to meaningfully participate through considering various procedural options. The commission could insert a delay into the procedural schedule to allow time for more active participation, or the commission could consider ordering Black Hills to file an amended advice letter extending the proposed effective date of the base rate tariffs. Black Hills responded on October 21st with an updated and corrected customer notice. The company states that the corrected notice was posted on its website and filed with the commission. It disagrees with the notice motion in that the customer notice had a incomplete description of the phase 2 portion, and makes no corresponding updates to that proposed mistake, but does correct all the other highlighted mistakes I just went over. In its response filed on October 25th, the company states that it also plans to file an updated customer notice based on its rebuttal case, which it'll also post on its website, email to customers, and publish in the public chieftain. It requests that the commission wait to order it to provide additional notice through its website, email, publication, or mail until after its rebuttal case is filed, because its rebuttal case will not exceed any increase in the original notice, and it would avoid customer confusion to not send out 3. The company does not propose mailing out the corrected notice, but will do so at its own expense if ordered by the commission, but again prefers to do so after rebuttal testimony is filed. Black Hills argues that Commission Electric Rule 3109F3D does not work to correct deficiencies here, and that we should actually look to Rule 1207, which allows the commission to order an applicant or petitioner to provide such additional notice as the commission deems appropriate. Black Hills argues that its original notice in conjunction with the corrected notice meet the standard of Colorado Statute 43104. It also contends that nothing in 43104, Rule 1207, or due process considerations require the commission to delay the proceeding or require an amended advice letter filing. It argues because this is a rate case proceeding, notice is statutory, not constitutional, because the commission is acting quasi-legislatively. Further, it argues that no additional notice is needed because the levels that will be ultimately approved will not be higher than the original proposal. It commits that its rebuttal case will not be seeking rate increases above the stated original customer notice, and there'll be no harm to any party or would-be intervener based on errors in the original customer notice. Finally, Black Hills argues that the overall scope and volume of the involvement in the proceeding so far suggests that adequate notice was provided. Also on October 25th, the commission received a response from Canyon City and Florence jointly. In their response, they support the notice motion and indicate the purpose of their response is to outline additional concerns as to what they refer to as an insufficient notice by the company. As to relief, they request that the commission order Black Hills to file a revised notice that includes phase 2 information and allow for an additional intervention period if the procedural schedule is delayed. They support the staff proposal that Black Hills provide the new notice by mail or bill insert and state that it's critically important that the revised notice be sent to all residential and small commercial customers. They explain that many customers, including the elderly and low income, may not usually or regularly check their email or access Black Hills website. So for decision today is whether to grant or deny the joint motion regarding the mistakes in the company's original customer notice, and then whether to take any other procedural actions.
Just one question, and then I'd welcome a recommendation. Is there any evidence of bad intent or anything like that, or is this just sloppiness?
Sure, thanks, Chair. I don't believe the joint motion's contending that this was done in order to intentionally dissuade participation in the proceeding or to mislead customers. However, I think it's certainly sloppy, and clearly the company could have paid more attention to its original filing. But overall, no, I don't think that this was intentional sloppiness.
If you give us a recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. So I'm going to sort of describe the recommendation in 3 parts. Just bear with me and I'll take a vote at the end if that makes sense. So as to the issue of whether to grant or deny the motion, I think we should grant the motion to the extent that it requires the company to file a corrected notice, as they already have done. I recommend that you require Black Hills to provide at its own cost an updated notice after its rebuttal testimony is provided on November 8th. I think the company should be required to do this by mail and in publication in the public chieftain pursuant to 43104. And the company would have to do that mailing at its own expense. In addition to that, ask in the motion, the joint movements also say the commission should consider other procedural avenues available to it, including whether the proceeding should be renoticed. I suggest that the commission indicate in the decision that the commission will look favorably on any out-of-time interventions filed pursuant to the commission's existing PMP rules, and that if any are received, we can address the procedural schedule as necessary when ruling on the motions, but decline to reopen the intervention period at this point. However, out of an abundance of caution, we suggest that the commission notice the commission's decision from today to all people that are generally interested in Black Hills proceedings on the commission's listserv. And we also recommend aligning the caption of the proceeding with that has been used by Black Hills. And if that changes anyone's desire to participate, we can address those intervention motions and the procedural schedule at a later date as well. If you take that recommendation, the proceeding caption would now read, quote, in the matter of advice letter number 871 filed by Black Hills, Colorado, Electric LLC to increase base rate revenues to implement revised base rates for all rate schedules and other tariff revisions. Finally, there's other procedural steps that the motion says that the commission could consider. And I recommend that you find that the commission does not see cause in these circumstances to pause the procedural schedule at this point, but could consider doing so if additional out-of-time motions for intervention are received. I think that's appropriate in this specific instance, given that the most of the information in the notice was accurate and it was accurate in the testimony filed in conjunction with the filing. The size of the discrepancy was relatively small and most importantly, because the commission, the company has committed that its rebuttal case will not go above the cap set by the original notice. So to summarize, I recommend you deny the motion, require the company to provide its own costs and additional updated mailing after rebuttal, and pause any decisions on the procedural schedule until we see if we get additional interventions.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC order consistent with your recommendation. Thank you, Ms. Dundas. Proceeding number 24 AL-0377E, Mr. Davis, Mr. Foreman.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the Commission's advisory staff. In early September, Public Service Company of Colorado filed an advice letter to modify its electric time of use rate schedules. The timing of that filing was directed by the Commission by previous decisions. The Commission subsequently set the new time of use tariff sheets for hearing and suspended their effective date for 120 days, and that would be through February 1st of 2025. And then by another decision, the Commission scheduled an en banc hearing on January 13th through the 15th and instructed Public Service to confer with the parties on a proposed procedural schedule that would culminate in that expedited hearing. On October 28th, Public Service filed an unopposed motion to adopt a consensus procedural schedule. However, the motion presents two options for the Commission, both unopposed by the parties. One option keeps that en banc hearing in January 2025, while the alternative delays the hearing to April. For the first option, answer testimony would be filed on November 25th, rebuttal would come in on December 20th, settlements would be due January 8th, and the hearing would take place as already scheduled. The proposed schedule in the motion indicates that even if the hearing were to take place in January, new time of use rates would not be implemented until July. And that is because Public Service requests 4 months to implement any new time of use rates, even if this accelerated schedule is adopted. Public Service states in the motion that the company requires significant lead time to develop and roll out its customer communication and education plans. For instance, the company states, even assuming it is possible for Public Service to begin billing customers on the new time of use rates before the summer cooling season, the company's efforts to inform and educate its customers about a significant rate change will be less effective if the period between a final decision in this proceeding and the introduction of the new rates is truncated. The motion further includes an explanation of a preference among several parties for the implementation of the new time of use rates later than contemplated by the commissioners. The parties warn that instituting new time of use rates during the summer could lead to a negative customer experience, resulting in higher opt-out rates. They add that starting the new time of use rates outside of the summer season would instead provide an opportunity for customers to familiarize themselves with the new rates and adapt their behaviors before the summer. Hence, the second consensus schedule follows a more traditional 250-day timeline. This option is specifically supported by staff of the Commission, the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, City of Boulder, Energy Outreach Colorado, and the Colorado Solar and Storage Association with the Solar Energy Industries Association. Under the second option, answer testimony would not be filed until January. That would be January 15th. Rebuttal would follow on February 21st. Settlements would be due towards the end of March, and the hearing would be 3 days during the week of April 7th. For this schedule, the earliest time of use rate implementation would be October. Public Service states in the motion that this 250-day timeline will afford the company additional time to prepare customers for the impending change and would likely lead to better customer adoption. Intervening parties are also concerned that an expedited schedule would not give them sufficient opportunity to review many substantive details at issue in this proceeding, such as the use of different load forecasts compared to other recently filed proceedings. And on that last point, Public Service filed a notice yesterday stating that certain questions posed to the company through discovery in this time of use rate case have prompted additional analysis related to future load forecasts and to the load and resources assumption in the company's just transition solicitation filing. Public Service explains that it intends to provide an updated sensitivity analysis to the parties in this time of use case on November 15th. Public Service states that while the company is not seeking to change the procedural schedule proposals that it included in the motion, it asks the Commission to consider the following. Per the expedited schedule, interveners would have 10 calendar days to consider the company's sensitivity analysis by the November 25th answer testimony proposed that was in the schedule. And alternatively, concerning the 250-day schedule, answer testimony would not be due until January 15th, which is a more substantial amount of time for the interveners to review and consider the company's sensitivity analysis. With respect to conferral with the parties, Public Service states that all parties have conveyed their ability to accommodate both of the procedural schedules presented in the motion. That makes the motion unopposed, and the company requests the Commission waive remaining response time. So the decision point for you this morning is, what procedural schedule would you like to adopt?
Do you have a recommendation?
Well, it's more of an observation, and that is that the Commission has been clear up to this point about its desire to implement any new time of use rates at the start of the next cooling season in 2025. So the Commission scheduled the evidentiary hearing in January 2025 already for that purpose. And right now there is a consensus procedural schedule before you that conforms with the scheduled hearing. And if the hearing is maintained in January, I'd suggest a public comment hearing be scheduled on an evening in mid-December. If the hearing is delayed to April, the public comment hearing can be conducted just prior to that rescheduled evidentiary hearing. There's no dispute over discovery procedures, and the order establishing the procedural schedule should confirm that discovery would be governed by the Commission's rules of practice and procedure. The order will need to extend the timeline with the suspension through June 11th. That's the additional 130 days that's allowed pursuant to statute. And finally, the order should include instructions on using a Zoom platform for participating in that remote evidentiary hearing.
Maybe I'll start with you, Commissioner Gilman. I think you had pretty strong feelings on getting this done before next summer. Is that your ongoing preference?
Interested to hear from both of you. I would say I have very strong feelings about us planning and preparing to spend billions of dollars on infrastructure based
Well,
around
that's
a
fair.
peak that we're not trying to mitigate and not trying to correct. That is super disturbing in terms of our and really the company's emphasis on trying to move this on the most cost-effective way. We're knowingly sending customers the wrong price signal and simultaneously investing tens of billions of dollars based around the wrong assumptions. So that's the basis of the urgency. I mean, we'll have, the JTS is already in. The DSP will still be being litigated for all intents and purposes. So does it influence those investment decisions? I don't know. But continuing to kick the can and show no urgency here ensures they never get incorporated properly. So that's my concern in a nutshell.
Well, I think I share that concern. I've been trying to fix this for 4 years. It's just perverse. So I guess the proposal commissioner plan is to keep it on track, on the earlier track.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we should stick with the January date. As I recall, when we were setting this up, we were doing the math around when we needed to have the application, when we needed to do the hearing in order to specifically have it be in place in time for the summer. And, I don't see anything that's come up that would change that desire. So I would stick with the earlier date.
As would I. Does that give you what you need, Mr. Davis?
Yes, and I think that can be an ABC order.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Proceeding number 24A-0405E, Ms. O'Neill, Black Hills and Sharing Incentive Mechanism.
Yes, good morning, commissioners. I'm Erin O'Neill with your fixed utility staff. On September 20th, 2024, Black Hills Colorado Electric filed an application for an extension of its authorization to share the revenues from off-system sales with customers for an additional 3 years through December 31st of 2027. Off-system sales are energy sales made to non-end-use customers after the company has met its native load obligations. Under the incentive sharing mechanism, the company shares the margins derived from off-system sales with customers, where customers receive 90% of the margins as a credit or reduction to the energy cost adjustment, or ECA, and the company retains the remaining 10%. If there is a net loss after a net positive, or rather than a net positive gain, the company does not share the loss with customers. Each year, the company calculates the annual margins for the prior year's off-system sales, and these margins are then included as a credit to the ECA beginning on March 1st of the following year. So, for example, the calendar year 2024 annual net margins are credited to customers over a 12-month period beginning in April of 2025. The company's incentive sharing mechanism was first approved in proceeding number 11AL382E, and the mechanism was most recently extended in proceeding number 21A0347E through decision number C210542. The decision approved the incentive sharing mechanism for a 3-year period that expires on December 31st of 2024. The company is not proposing any changes in the incentive sharing mechanism methodology or cost recovery mechanics. Over the first 10 years in which the incentive sharing mechanism has been in place, which is 2014 through 2023, the company's cumulative off-system sales margins have been approximately $14 million. So under the sharing mechanism, $12.6 million has been credited back to customers through the ECA, while the company has retained $1.4 million. In addition to seeking the extension approval of the mechanism extension, the company also requests the commission approve 2 waivers or variance requests. First, the company requests a one-time and limited tariff waiver of the incentive sharing mechanism tariff provisions located on sheet number 62 of the company's tariff book that require the companies to submit its application for extension of the incentive sharing mechanism on or before May 1st of 2024. The company explains that unforeseeable workload prevented the company from meeting this May 1st timing requirement. Company claims that no harm or prejudice will occur through the Commission's granting of this request. Second, Black Hills is requesting either a waiver or a variance to permit the continuation of the existing incentive sharing mechanism until this instant application is approved, should the approval process extend beyond December 31st of 2024. Company acknowledges that depending on the length of this proceeding, this waiver request may not be necessary. So I can pause here for any questions or discussion, or give you my recommendation.
We'd welcome your recommendation.
Staff recommends that the Commission approves the Black Hills application for a 3-year extension to the company's incentive sharing mechanism through December 31st of 2027, and order the company to file a compliance tariff reflecting the pro forma tariff sheets provided in this application. Staff recommends that the Commission grant the company's requested variance from its tariff sheet number 62 that requires an extension application be filed by May 1st. And staff recommends that the Commission deny the waiver request regarding the continuation of the current incentive sharing mechanism tariff as moot.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision, Ms. O'Neill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Reitz, Mr. Davis, proceeding to look at natural gas. Welcome to the debate and discussion.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Bill Reitz with your Research and Emerging Issues staff. Senate Bill 23291, signed by Governor Polis on May 11th, 2023, includes a provision codified in Section 40-3-121 CRS, requiring the PUC to open a proceeding by the middle of November following a final non-appealable decision in Public Service Company of Colorado's first clean heat plan, proceeding number 23A-0392EG, to study, quote, whether and how residential development and other development in certain geographic areas drive natural gas infrastructure costs, end quote, for the company's gas utility operations. As part of the proceeding, SB 291 requires that the Commission identify specific new large infrastructure investments to study. For each project, the Commission must consider the extent new residential development or other development necessitated investment in infrastructure. Further, the proceeding must include a cost-benefit analysis of growth in new residential development on existing customers and customers who necessitated the infrastructure investment. The PUC must also determine whether alternative infrastructure, service investments, or other utility actions could mitigate impacts on non-participating or income-qualified customers and identify the upfront and service life annualized costs and benefits of alternatives to new large infrastructure projects. SB 291 also requires the Commission to solicit public comment and hold a hearing on the information it gathers, but the statute does not explicitly set a date for the PUC to complete this proceeding. PUC advisory staff are in the initial phases of scoping the natural gas cost causation study, including working with legal staff to better define terms otherwise undefined in the statute, including, quote, new large infrastructure, end quote, and, quote, certain geographical areas, end quote. Staff is also considering whether utilizing data from recent rate cases qualifies as new investments or whether the mandated study should be forward-looking and evaluate only future projects. Decision for you today is whether to open an M docket proceeding pursuant to Section 40-3-121 CRS for the Commission to conduct an investigation into the cost causation study of residential development and other factors of the company's infrastructure investments, and whether to appoint a hearing commissioner to manage the case. I'll pause now for your discussion of the cost causation study, or I can proceed to a recommendation.
Unless Commissioner Gilman has any comments, go ahead. Why don't you give your recommendation?
Sure. Advisors recommend that the Commission adopt an ABC order to open an M docket to house the cost causation study and appoint Commissioner Gilman as hearing commissioner.
Commissioner Gilman, before we take a vote, are you amenable to that recommendation?
Yeah, same.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
As do I, and I just extend my thanks to you, Commissioner Gilman, for your leadership and willing to take this on. But I think you need to vote too.
I also agree with your recommendation this week.
And that can be in ABC order. And thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. DeCenzo, disconnection practice rulemaking.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mitchell DeCenzo of your Commission Council. The decision board before you today is whether to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking or NOPR to make a minor clarification to the Commission's rules regulating electric utilities and rules regulating gas utilities, respectively. For context, Council was made aware of a potential conflict between the rules issued in proceeding number 22R-0557EG, which are rules addressing the disconnection of service due to non-payment pursuant to House Bill 22-1018, and the governing statute at Colorado Revised Statute 40-3-103.6. Specifically, issued Rules 3407E7C of the Rules Regulating Electric Utilities and Rule 4407E7B of the Rules Regulating Gas Utilities currently read, a utility shall postpone service discontinuance to a residential customer during an emergency or safety event or circumstance impacting the local area. However, while there was a general focus on the welfare of residential customers throughout the proceeding, there was no intention for the prohibition on the discontinuance of service to apply only to residential customers. Such a limitation was not contemplated throughout the rulemaking, and it appears that the term was an inadvertent addition to the rules. To clarify this issue and bring the rules in compliance with statute, the Commission can issue a targeted NOPR to remove the term residential from the affected rules. I can pause here for discussion or proceed to offering a recommendation.
I think we'd like a recommendation.
Council recommends opening a targeted rulemaking for the narrow purpose of removing the term residential from the Commission's aforementioned rules, making clear that the discontinuance of service during an emergency or safety event or circumstance is prohibited for all customers, and referring the matter to an administrative law judge. Additionally, since the scope of the NOPR is so narrow, Council recommends the Commission direct the ALJ to conduct the rulemaking on an expedited basis, with the hearing to be set within 30 days of publication in the Colorado Register, and initial comments due within 15 days of publication, and reply comments due within 10 days of initial comments, all of which is within the confines allowable pursuant to the Colorado Administrative Procedure Act.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman.
I also agree.
As do I, and I think that can be a ABC. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Plant, any final comments before we adjourn?
No final comments. Thanks.
Commissioner Gilman.
Nothing, thanks.
With that, we're adjourned. Thanks all.